Hey everyone. Welcome to my channel, Nancy's Tales. I'm here to bring you American folklore, gripping crime stories, and all sorts of intriguing topics. Thanks for joining me for today's tale. Back in the Song Dynasty, or let's say, in a small American town during the late 1800s, there was a fortune teller named Luke Nolan. He was a big deal in his little corner of Harmony County. Luke didn't just read palms or tarot cards for a few bucks. No, he used his skills as an excuse to travel across the country, soaking in the sights. One year, he rolled into Stone River, a dusty town in Clearwater County, and set up his booth right outside the county courthouse. He hung a shiny silver dagger above a stack of yellowed papers and kept a small fire pit glowing at the base. On a sign above, he scrawled in bold letters, "Slashing through the fates of the unlearned, Luke Nolan sees all and fears none." Most folks didn't pay him much mind. Scammers like him were a dime a dozen back then. But Luke had a knack for drawing attention with his cryptic flair. One day, Luke had just finished setting up his booth when a clean-cut guy approached him. This wasn't your average drifter. This was Tom Kendrick, the top deputy in Stone River. Tom tipped his hat and greeted Luke casually before rattling off his birth date, March 15, 1845. Luke scribbled it down, counted on his fingers, and then paused, his face turning grim. After a long silence, he muttered, "This fate. I can't read it." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Who's this bourgeois you're mumbling about?" he asked, leaning in. Luke's cryptic response only piqued his curiosity more. Turns out, bourgeois was just Luke's way of saying the reading was off limits. And Tom Kendrick? He wasn't just any deputy, he was the head honcho of law enforcement in Stone River, a no-nonsense guy who didn't take kindly to riddles. "Why can't you read my fate?" Tom pressed, crossing his arms. Luke sighed, "Sir, if you're a drinker, I'd say skip it. If you're short-tempered, don't even ask." Tom smirked. "I don't touch the bottle, and I've got patience to spare. Spill it." Luke hesitated, then said, "All right, give me your birth date one more time, just to be sure." Tom repeated it, slow and clear. Luke pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, scribbled some calculations, and double-checked his work. Finally, he let out a heavy breath. "Deputy, this fate of yours, better forget I said anything." Tom wasn't having it. His gut churned with unease, but he pushed harder. "Quit beating around the bush, Luke. What's the word?" Luke shook his head resigned and scribbled 2 lines, "The white tiger looms at dawn, a calamity awaits." He handed it over. Tom squinted at the paper. "What's this gibberish mean? Sounds like bad news." Luke, cornered, admitted, "It's not good, sir. It means, the man in charge is gonna die." Tom laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. He dealt with enough con artists to smell a scam. "All right, wise guy, when's this supposed death of mine happening?" Luke, unfazed, replied, "This year." Tom leaned closer. "How many months?" Luke said, "This month." Tom grinned, egging him on. "How many days?" Luke locked eyes with him. "Today." Tom's grin widened. "What time, huh? You got a clock on this prophecy?" Luke didn't flinch. "Tonight, at the 3rd watch, around 1 a.m. That did it." Tom's patience snapped. "You're a real piece of work, Luke. Out here spinning yarns for a quick buck. I ought to let you off with a warning, but if I'm still kicking tomorrow, and I'm coming back to smash this little circus of yours. Watch yourself." Luke stood his ground. "If you're alive tomorrow, deputy, you can shoot me dead right here. I won't say a word against it." Tom, fuming, grabbed Luke's sign and tore it down, cursing him out as a fraud. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with," he barked, stomping off as a crowd gathered outside the courthouse, drawn by the commotion. Tom's outburst caught the attention of the courthouse staff. Folks peeked out, whispering about the deputy's temper. "I was just minding my own business," Tom shouted to the onlookers. "Thought I'd get a laugh out of this fortune teller. But this clown's got the nerve to say I'll drop dead tonight at 1 a.m. Me. Fit as a fiddle, no sickness, nothing. Ain't that a load of hogwash? I ought to drag him to the sheriff's office and sort him out." The crowd tried to calm him down. "Easy, Tom," one clerk said, pulling him back toward the courthouse. "Don't waste your breath on a 2-bit hustler like that." Meanwhile, others turned on Luke. You've got some guts, picking a fight with Deputy Kendrick, a bystander sneered. You think you can waltz into Stone River and curse folks like that? Pack up and get out of here before he shuts you down for good. Luke just sighed. If I sugarcoat it, the reading's a lie. If I tell the truth, I make enemies. Ain't no winning. Shaking his head, he gathered his things, dagger, papers, fire pit, and hit the road, leaving Stone River behind. Tom stormed back to the courthouse, still steaming, but managed to cool off by the end of his shift. When he got home, though, his wife, Penny Kendrick, noticed the scowl etched on his face. Penny was a looker, 10 years younger than Tom, and always quick to fuss over him. "What's eating you, hon?" she asked, setting a plate of cornbread on the table. "Nothing," Tom grumbled. "Drop it." Penny wasn't one to let things slide. "You get chewed out at work or something?" "Nope." "Did you tangle with somebody?" Tom finally cracked.
All right, fine.
"I stopped by that fortune teller's booth today. Jerk said I'm gonna die tonight at 1 a.m. Can you believe that nonsense?" Penny's eyes flashed with anger. "Who does he think he is, cursing you like that? You didn't haul him in." "Tried to," Tom said, "but the boys talked me out of it. Said it wasn't worth the trouble." Penny huffed. "You stay put. I'm going to track that creep down and give him a piece of my mind. We ain't got no debts, no enemies. Why's he spreading lies about us?" Tom waved her off. "Don't bother, Penny. You're a lady, let me handle it. If I'm still breathing tomorrow, I'll settle the score myself."
No rush.
Penny backed off, seeing how riled up he was. Later, as dusk settled in, Tom said, "Run to the store and grab some leeks. I ain't sleeping tonight, let's see who's got the last laugh." That night, Tom hit the whiskey hard, downing glass after glass to drown his frustration. Before long, he was slurring and slumped in his armchair, dead to the world. Penny Kendrick watched her husband, Tom, snoring in his armchair, whiskey bottle still dangling from his hand. "Tom, honey," she called, shaking her head. "You can't just pass out here like this." He didn't budge. With a sigh, she hollered for their housemaid, Sadie Bloom. "Sadie, come give me a hand getting him to bed." Sadie shuffled in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She gave Tom a nudge, then another, but he was out cold. "Ma'am, he's drunk as a skunk," she muttered. Together, Penny and Sadie hauled Tom up, one under each arm, and dragged him to the bedroom. They dumped him on the bed, his boots still on, and he didn't so much as twitch. Penny turned to Sadie. "That fortune teller got him all riled up today. Said he'd die at 1 a.m. I ain't buying it, but it's stuck in his head." Sadie's eyes widened. "No way, ma'am. That's crazy talk." "Exactly," Penny said, crossing her arms. "Tell you what, neither of us is sleeping tonight. I'll grab some sewing, and you keep me company. We'll see if this fool's prediction holds water. If it don't, we're marching down to find him tomorrow and settle up." The two women settled in the parlor, Penny stitching a quilt while Sadie fought to keep her eyes open. By midnight, Sadie's head was bobbing. "Sadie Bloom." Penny snapped. "I told you to stay awake. Why re you dozing off?" Sadie jolted upright.
I ain't sleeping, Mom.
"I swear." But her words slurred, and she slumped back, half dreaming. Penny glanced at the clock. "What time is it, girl?" Sadie squinted at the mantel clock just as it chimed 3 times. 1 a.m. It's the third watch, ma'am," she mumbled, then nodded off again. Penny shook her, but Sadie was gone. Right then, a thud echoed from the bedroom. Penny's heart skipped. She heard the front door creak open, then slam shut. "Sadie, wake up," she hissed, grabbing a lantern. She rushed to the bedroom, empty. Tom was gone. With Sadie stumbling behind, Penny followed the sound to the front porch. There, in the flickering lantern light, she saw a figure in a white shirt, one hand over their face, sprinting toward the big creek out front. Before she could shout, the figure leaped in with a splash. That creek fed straight into the Mississippi, and its current was fierce, no chance of fishing anyone out. Penny and Sadie collapsed on the bank, sobbing. "Why'd he jump in?" Penny wailed. "What are we supposed to do now?" Their cries woke the neighbors, who spilled out to see what was wrong. Penny, tears streaming, recounted the whole mess, Tom's fight with the fortune teller, his drinking, and now this. It's too weird to believe, one neighbor said. I saw him at the courthouse this morning, raising hell with that Luke fella. And now he's gone, just like the guy predicted. The folks in Stone River had always looked up to Tom. Seeing him dead hit them hard. Someone stepped up to report it to the county judge, and with Penny and Sadie as witnesses, plus Luke's eerie prophecy, no one doubted what had happened. 3 months flew by. One afternoon, Penny was sitting idle at home with Sadie, the house quieter than ever without Tom. Suddenly, 2 rosy-cheeked women barged in, reeking of cheap wine. "Penny, darling," one slurred. "Got some good news for you." Penny blinked, recognizing them as local matchmakers, Mabel and Dot. "Good news," she scoffed. "My husband's dead, ladies. What's there to celebrate?" Mabel waved a hand. "Oh, come on now. How long's Tom been gone? Time moves on, hon. You're still young, pretty as a picture. Why not find yourself a new man?" Penny's eyes welled up. "It's barely been 100 days since he passed," she choked out. Dot sighed dramatically. 100 days already? My, time flies. Tom was a good egg, sure, helped folks out all the time. But he's gone, Penny. You gotta live. Why stay cooped up here all lonesome? Let us fix you up." Penny wiped her tears. "Where am I supposed to find another man like Tom?" she asked, her voice breaking. Mabel grinned. "Ain't hard, sugar. I've got just the fella in mind." Penny cut her off. "Hold it. No one's gonna match Tom Kendrick. I'm not feeling up to this today, y'all can see yourselves out." The matchmakers shrugged and shuffled off, but they weren't done. A few days later, they were back, pitching their idea again. Penny sighed.
All right, fine.
"If you can meet 3 conditions, I'll hear you out. Otherwise, I'm staying a widow and guarding Tom's memory forever." Mabel clapped her hands.
Namien, Civici.
3:30, we'll make it happen. Penny laid it out. "First, I'll only marry another Kendrick. Tom was the top deputy in this county, so the next guy's gotta be on his level. And third, I ain't leaving this house. If someone wants me, they're moving in here." Dot chuckled. "That's it? Piece of cake. Tom was the best deputy around, but guess what? His cousin, Ted Kendrick, just took over as the new head deputy since Tom passed. And he's willing to move in with you. How's that sound?" Penny frowned. "I don't buy it. Too convenient." Mabel thumped her chest. "I'm 62 years old, Penny. If I'm lying, may I drop dead and eat dirt in your yard? Swear it." Penny softened. "Well, all right then. Go talk to this Ted fella. See if we're a match." The matchmakers scurried off, thrilled. Within weeks, they'd sealed the deal. Ted Kendrick moved into Penny's house, and the two hit it off like they were made for each other. A perfect pair, or so it seemed. One night, Ted and Penny were lounging at home, strumming a guitar and sipping whiskey. They'd had a few too many, so Penny called out, "Sadie, whip us up some coffee to sober up." Sadie, half asleep, trudged to the kitchen, grumbling under her breath. "Back when Tom was around, I didn't have to deal with this nonsense in the middle of the night." She stoked the wood stove, but the fire wouldn't catch. Annoyed, she jabbed at it with a poker. After a few whacks, the stove rattled and rose a foot off the floor. Sadie froze. There atop the stove was a figure, blue around the neck, hair wild, tongue lolling, blood dripping from its eyes. "Sadie," it rasped, "avenge me." She screamed, collapsing in a heap. Ted and Penny rushed in, finding her out cold. They splashed water on her face and pinched her cheeks until she came to. "What happened?" Penny demanded. Sadie, trembling, pointed at the stove. "I was stoking the fire, and I saw him. Tom. Dead as a doornail, begging me to set things right." Penny's face darkened. She slapped Sadie hard, 5, 6 times. "You little liar. I told you to make coffee, not spin ghost stories. Quit faking and get out of my sight." Sadie, shaken and stinging, retreated to her room. Ted and Penny, sobered by the ruckus, headed back to bed. In a low voice, Penny muttered, "Ted, why'd she say that? She's no good anymore, we need to get rid of her." Ted nodded. Where's she gonna go? Leave it to me, Penny said, a glint in her eye. The next morning, Ted Kendrick headed off to the courthouse for his deputy duties, leaving Penny alone with Sadie. Penny called her over, her voice cold but calm. Sadie Bloom, you've been with me 7, maybe 8 years now. Ever since Tom passed, though, you've been off, acting strange, not yourself. What do you say about finding a husband and moving on? Sadie blinked, caught off guard. Me, ma'am? I wouldn't dare dream of it. Who'd you have in mind? Penny didn't hesitate. I've already arranged it. You're marrying Lyle Tucker. Sadie's stomach dropped. Lyle Tucker was a local deadbeat, drunk half the time, gambling away what little he had the other half. But Penny didn't give her a say. Within days, Sadie was packed off with a small dowry and wed to Lyle, no discussion needed. It didn't take long for things to sour. 3 months in, Lyle had squandered every penny Sadie brought with her, pawning her clothes and trinkets for booze and cards. When he stumbled home sloshed, he beat her black and blue, hollering, "You worthless tramp. Look at me, scraping by, why ain't you begging Penny for cash to keep us afloat?" Sadie couldn't take it anymore. One day, bruised and desperate, she trudged back to Penny's house. "Ma'am," she pleaded, tears streaming, "Lyle's a monster. Drinks, gambles, hits me, now he's demanding I come here for money. Please help me." Penny barely looked up from her sewing. "You're a married woman now, Sadie. Your troubles ain't my problem. You've served me long enough, so I'll toss you a couple bucks out of kindness. But don't come crying to me again." Sadie took the $2, mumbled a thank you, and shuffled back to Lyle. The money lasted maybe a week. One night, Lyle staggered in, reeking of whiskey. "You stinking hag," he roared. "I'm flat broke, why ain't you out there getting more cash?" Sadie snapped back, "I just got $2 from Penny last time, and she ain't giving more. Where am I supposed to go now?" Lyle's face twisted. "If you don't get out there and bring something back, I'll break your legs, you hear me?" Terrified, Sadie had no choice. She slipped out into the night, heading for Penny's place again. But when she got there, the house was dark, the door bolted shut. She hovered by the porch, too scared to knock. Penny's patience was thin as it was. Defeated, she turned back toward home. Sadie trudged along the dirt road, passing 2 crossroads, when a figure stepped out of the shadows. "Sadie Bloom," a voice rasped, "I've got something for you." She froze, peering into the dimness. The man wore a deputy's uniform, Tom Kendrick's uniform. "I'm Tom Kendrick," he said, his voice low and hollow. "I'm hiding out somewhere I can't say. Stick out your hand, I've got a gift." Sadie's mind reeled, but her arm moved on its own, reaching out. Something cold dropped into her palm. She blinked, and when she looked up, Tom, or whatever it was, had vanished. In her hand was a small sack of silver coins. Too rattled to question it, Sadie clutched the sack and hurried home. When she knocked, Lyle's gruff voice barked from inside, "Where you been so long?" "I went to Penny's for money," Sadie stammered, stepping in. "Her place was locked up, so I came back. But on the way, I ran into Tom Kendrick. He gave me this sack of silver." Lyle snatched it from her, spilling the coins onto the table. Then he laughed, harsh and mean. "You gone loco, woman? Spouting nonsense in my face. Let's see this silver first." He swung the door wide, dragging her inside. Counting the coins, Lyle's tone shifted. "Hold up. You said you saw Tom by the stove that night, too. Something's fishy about his death, ain't it? I yelled earlier, 'cause I didn't want the neighbors hearing. Stash this money, we're taking it to the sheriff tomorrow and digging into this." Sadie nodded, still shaken, and hid the silver under a loose floorboard. But as dawn crept in, Lyle started second-guessing. Ted Kendrick was the head deputy now, ruffling his feathers could backfire. And this whole story? It hinged on ghosts and coins with no clear source. No evidence, no case. After mulling it over, Lyle scrapped the sheriff idea. Instead, he traded the silver for new clothes and a few gifts, planning a visit to Penny and Ted's place to smooth things over. Lyle and Sadie dolled up in their fresh outfits, grabbed the gift boxes, and headed to Penny's house. Ted and Penny greeted them, eyeing the packages. "What's all this?" Penny asked, arching a brow. Lyle grinned. "Yesterday, Thanks to Ted's good name, I made a quick $2. Thought we'd bring some gifts as a thank you. I'm off the bottle and the cards now, clean slate. Penny smirked. Well, ain't that something? Lyle, you head on home. Sadie, stick around a few days, I could use the company. Lyle tipped his hat and left. Once he was gone, Penny turned to Sadie. Tomorrow, I'm heading to the church on East Hill to light a candle. Come with me. The next morning, they washed up, ate breakfast, and set out for East Hill Church. Penny walked ahead, while Sadie lagged, fussing with her skirt hem. As she bent down, a figure in a deputy's coat flickered into view. Sadie Bloom, it whispered, I'm Tom Kendrick. Avenge me, I'll show you something. Before she could react, it pressed a folded paper into her hand and vanished. Sadie glanced around, spooked. A ghost giving me stuff again? She thought. Fearing Penny's wrath, she stuffed the paper into her pocket and kept quiet. They lit their candles at the church and returned home. That night, Sadie spilled everything to Lyle, pulling out the paper. He unfolded it, squinting at the scribbled words. The big man's girl comes first, the little one after. Know the third watch, it's a shot into the water. Lyle scratched his head. What's this gibberish? Keep it hush for now, let's see what shakes out. Sadie nodded, tucking the paper away, both of them uneasy about what it might mean. Time flew, and by February of the next year, Stone River got a new county judge. His name was Henry Hank Quinn, a young hotshot with a sharp mind and a reputation for fairness. Hank had grown up reading law books, determined to untangle the messy crimes of the world and bring justice to every case, no matter how murky. 3 days into his tenure, before he'd even settled into the judge's bench, Hank had a strange dream. He saw himself in the courthouse, papers fluttering around, and 2 lines written on the wall, Know the third watch, it's a shot into the water. He woke up with those words burned into his brain. Come morning, he strode into court and scribbled the lines on a chalkboard for everyone to see. Anyone know what this means? He asked the room. Clerks, deputies, and onlookers shrugged. No one had a clue. Hank wasn't deterred. This ain't just nonsense, he said. I want answers. He turned to Ted Kendrick, the head deputy. Ted, write this up on a big sign. Post it outside the courthouse. Whoever cracks this riddle gets $10 in silver. Ted nodded, and soon the sign was up, drawing a crowd. Folks milled around, eyeing the reward, but no one could unravel the mystery. That same day, Lyle Tucker was out buying groceries when he overheard the buzz. Curious, he ambled over and read the sign. His jaw dropped. Those were the exact words from Sadie's paper. His pulse raced. $10 could set us up nice, he thought. But then he hesitated. Hank Quinn was new, sharp, and unpredictable. Stirring the pot might land him in hot water. Lyle went home and spilled it to Sadie. That judge's got your ghost's words plastered out front. Should I claim the reward? Sadie's eyes widened. Tom's shown up 3 times now, begging me to set things right. He gave us that silver, too. If we don't speak up, I'm scared we'll catch hell from the spirits. Lyle wavered, nerves jangling. Later, he wandered back to the courthouse, still undecided. Spotting his neighbor Jim Grayson, a clerk who'd always been decent to him, Lyle pulled him aside. Jim, you reckon I should tell the judge about this riddle? Where it came from? Jim frowned. Where'd you get it? Sadie's got a paper hidden in her sewing box, Lyle whispered. Some ghost handed it to her at East Hill Church. Jim nodded slowly. Tell you what, I'll feel out Judge Quinn first. You go grab that paper. If he asks, you'll need it to back you up. Jim slipped back into the courthouse, catching Hank alone since Ted was out on patrol. Judge, he said quietly, my neighbor Lyle Tucker knows where those words came from. Says his wife got him on a paper from some spirit up at East Hill Church. Hank's eyes lit up. Bring him in now. Meanwhile, Lyle raced home and dug the paper out of Sadie's sewing box. But when he unfolded it, his heart sank. The writing was gone, just a blank sheet stared back at him. Oh hell, he muttered, panicking. The judge's men were already banging on his door, summons in hand. With no choice, he grabbed the blank paper and trudged to the courthouse, sweating bullets. Hank Quinn ushered Lyle into the back room, dismissing everyone but Jim Grayson. All right, Tucker, Hank said, leaning back in his chair. Show me this paper. Lyle dropped to his knees, voice trembling. Sir, last year my wife Sadie went to East Hill Church to light a candle. Some figure, claims it was a spirit, gave her this paper. It had those exact words you wrote up. I stashed it in her sewing box, but when I checked just now, it's blank. Here's all I got.
Jag inte lying, I swear.
Hank took the blank sheet, studying it calmly. You remember what it said? Yes, sir, Lyle nodded, reciting, the big man's girl comes first, the little one after. No, the third watch, it's a shot into the water. Hank motioned for Jim to write it down, then stared at the words. This spirit, what did it tell Sadie? Just said she's gotta avenge him, Lyle replied. Hank's temper flared. Avenge him? What kind of hogwash is that? If it's a spirit, what's it got to complain about? You expect me to believe a ghost's handing out revenge notes? Lyle shrank back. Please, sir, hear me out. There's more to it, I'll tell you everything. Better make sense, Hank growled. If it does, you'll get your silver. If it's bunk, I'll have you thrown out on your ear. Lyle, shaking, spilled the whole tale. Sadie's years with the Kendricks, Tom's 3 ghostly visits, the sack of silver, and that chilling night she saw him by the stove, blue-necked and bloody-eyed. Hank listened, scribbling notes. When Lyle finished, Hank let out a booming laugh. Well, I'll be damned, he said, then barked an order. Fetch Ted, Kendrick, and Penny, lock 'em up till we sort this out. Ted and Penny were hauled in, bewildered. What's this about, Judge? Ted blustered. I ain't done nothing. Hank smirked. Oh, you've done plenty. Let's break down that riddle. The big man's girl comes first, the little one after, that's Tom Kendrick, the old top deputy, and you, Ted, his cousin who took his spot. The little one after means Penny here, stepping into his life. No, the third watch, it's a shot into the water. Tom died at 1 a.m., staged to look like he jumped in the creek. But Sadie saw him by the stove, strangled, blue-necked, blood in his eyes. That's a murder, not a drowning. And here's the kicker, a stove sits over a well in old houses like yours. Bet Tom's body's down there. He turned to his men. Take Lyle and drag these 2 back to their place. Tear that stove apart. If you find a strangled corpse, report back fast. The crowd trailing them didn't buy it, until they got to Penny's house. The deputies pried up the stove, revealing a stone slab. Under that, a deep well. They drained it and sent a man down. Sure enough, up came a body, Tom Kendrick, face unchanged, neck bruised purple from a noose. Ted and Penny crumpled, speechless, as the townsfolk gasped in horror. Under Hank's grilling, the truth unraveled. Ted Kendrick had been a down-on-his-luck drifter years back, caught stealing in a snowstorm. Tom found him, took pity, and brought him home to recover. Seeing potential, Tom trained Ted as a deputy, filling a vacancy at the courthouse. But Ted, close in age to Penny, sparked an affair with her. They'd sneak around whenever Tom was out. That fateful night, Ted overheard Tom ranting about Luke's prediction. Seizing the chance, he and Penny got Tom drunk, strangled him, and dumped his body down the kitchen well. Ted then staged the creek jump, covering his face, running out, and tossing a rock into the water to fool Sadie. Later, he moved the stove over the well to hide the crime, and Penny played the grieving widow, roping in matchmakers to legitimize Ted moving in. They'd planned to pocket Tom's estate for good. With the scheme exposed, Ted and Penny couldn't weasel out. Hank sentenced them to hang for murder, avenging Tom at last. True to his word, he handed Lyle $40 in silver, 10 for the riddle, 30 for the tip. Lyle gave Jim Grayson $2 as a thank you, then used the rest to start fresh with Sadie. They swore off trouble, Lyle ditching the bottle and cards for good, and raised a family with lessons hard-learned.